It's the Ross Tucker Football Podcast.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. I would never do that to you guys. It is a teaching tutorial Thursday presented by DraftKings, America's #1 rated sportsbook app. They got a crazy, awesome promotion for UFC. Just make sure you throw the code Ross in. Teaching Tutorial Thursday means we have the civilian GOAT. Yes, greatest of all time. Greg Cosell, NFL matchup show on ESPN, NFL Films, 42 years. There is nobody better. In my opinion, there is nobody more objective. He doesn't have people he needs to please. He doesn't care. He just says what the videotape shows. I absolutely love it. Just like I love any of you or all of you that go ahead and help our show in any way. You are the real winners.
I want winners. I want people that want to win.
Easiest contest in the world, #1. Spreading the word via social media with a quote tweet or a retweet or a like or a love or a reply or anything. Anything at all. Frank Aroni, he quote tweeted the Even Money podcast. Thank you, Frank. That's all we needed. I think it might have been the Vikings clip that we posted at RossTuckerPod. You can also quote tweet or retweet anything I do at RossTuckerNFL. Facebook. I look at Facebook a lot. Instagram. It all helps. Frank, Arone. Let me know if you want a signed picture, press pass, whatever. Football card. Sponsor confirmation email winner, Jim Walsh. Jim Walsh went to fantasypoints.com and threw the code 21Feast in. Very simple, Jim. I love it. Graham Barfield was amazing from Fantasy Points yesterday. Absolutely amazing with his yards created metric talking running backs. Just use the code 21Feast over there. Congrats, Jim. And then the YouTube shout out, which is like these cameo videos I do for people. People have me do cameo videos. They hire me on Cameo to give them like a happy birthday shout out. I'm going to give you whatever you want, Stephen Clinton. Just let me know. I saw your awesome YouTube comment after you subscribed, youtube.com/RossTuckerNFL. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
All right, I already told you about him. He is the greatest of all time, Greg Cosell. He'll actually join us next Friday morning. So we will be the first place where you can hear Greg's post-round 1 thoughts, and Greg and I can talk about it and just the interesting fits. You know, we don't talk – I'll talk more about what I think about some of the decisions teams made. Greg will dive more into the fits and where we see these players playing for these new teams. So that's next Friday morning. We'll do the third Ross Tucker Football Podcast of the week next week. Got some awesome stuff planned for Even Money and Fantasy Feast as well. So today we're going over the DBs, Greg, both corners and safeties. It's our last position group. We've done a different position group every week for the last, 8 weeks. People can go back. That's a cool thing about podcasts. You can listen to them or watch them on YouTube whenever. Before we get there, though, Greg, we did get a couple of official weights from guys that were at the Indy Combine that stood out to people. I guess the medical checks. They finally had the medical checks last weekend. And I just got to get your thoughts on it. You'll probably tell me it's meaningless. Maybe you'll tell me it's not. I don't know. The first one, Devontae Smith weighed in at 166 pounds. So he's over 6 feet tall. He's 6'1.5", whatever. 166 pounds. Now, we thought he was 170, Greg. So I don't know that it makes that much of a difference. But does it matter to you at all that he's 166 and not 170?
Oh, no. But the point is, he's an outlier. He's an exception because of his weight. And that will be discussed in draft meetings, Ross. There's no question. He's a high-level traits receiver. There's no question that when you watch him on tape and you see the traits and the attributes, you say this guy's a really, really good receiver. But at 166, he's an exception. So it will be discussed. It's easy to say right now, and certainly because he played at Alabama at the highest level of college football, that, it doesn't matter because he played so well at that level. It's an impossible question to answer, but it will be discussed because he is truly an exception, and that's just the reality.
And then you've got, it's funny because I was thinking like Deshaun Jackson's awfully skinny. I was trying to think about the other receivers that are really, really light. Hollywood Brown doesn't weigh very much.
Yeah, but think about what you're saying. Devontae Smith is being talked about as a top 10 pick. So if you draft Devontae Smith in the top 10, then you're expecting him to be a high-level wide receiver one who's an all-pro, correct?
Yeah.
Deshaun Jackson's had a really nice career. Deshaun Jackson would never be considered a top 5 receiver in the NFL. And by the way, he was the 47th or 49th player chosen in a draft, and he's a specific kind of player. He's an explosive vertical dimension.
But I would say, Greg, and you might disagree, I think if you knew you were getting Deshaun Jackson and Deshaun Jackson's career, I think he would go in the top 10. Now, like with the way the game is now, with the number of plays, the number of big touchdowns stretching the field Deshaun Jackson had, I think. But that's because, Greg, you know he's going to play 10 years and be productive. Of course you would. I think they'd probably take him in the top 10, but you don't know that now.
No, and again, you make an interesting point about the vertical dimension and the explosive plays, because that's what offensive football, in a sense, has become. Coordinators are trying to create explosive plays to score touchdowns. So that's an impossible question to answer about Deshaun Jackson. But in terms of volume, you would never call him a wide receiver one.
As for Zaven Collins, Greg, he weighed 270.
Yeah, that surprised me.
So you want to talk about an outlier? There are not any 270-pound off-the-ball linebackers in the NFL. There just aren't.
No, and the fact that he weighed 270, I'm assuming he wanted to gain weight. He knew there was going to be a recheck. So I'm trying to think that what that means for him. What does he see himself as? Because when he was 259 at his pro day, I thought, wow, that's a good weight. This kid's really athletic. He's fluid. He's smooth. He's a terrific athlete for that size. You start to get to 270, and you start thinking that this guy's not a linebacker. You start thinking that he's really a defensive lineman. So does he see himself that way? Does he ultimately want to transition as a defensive end? I don't know the answer to that. You'd have to talk to him. He showed some pass rush traits at Tulsa, but he wasn't really used that way that much. So I was very surprised to see that, because now I'm uncertain as to what he is as he transitions to the league.
So I would tell you, just like they're talking about Devontae Smith, they're talking about Zaven Collins weighing 270, and they're getting to the bottom of it. Did he let himself go a little bit after the pro day?
That's a good point too.
Did he really have to fight to get under 260 for the pro day?
Right.
Because he wanted to have good measurables with the jumps and the shuttles and the 40 and stuff. Is he really a naturally 265, high 260s guy? I'm skeptical that he was 259 at his pro day, because that feels to me like a guy who knew he had to be under 260 at his pro day.
Well, then here's the question. Let's say he truly played this season at Tulsa at 267, 268, 270. Then that's all the more remarkable, the way in which he moves at that weight. So maybe he too is an exception in a good way, and I'm not saying Smith is an exception in a bad way. I'm just saying, maybe Collins is just one of those freaky guys that moves like he does at 270. And you're right. There have not been off the ball linebackers. You can go back to Levon Kirkland, but obviously he was not that level of athlete. He was not a smooth guy. He was kind of tight-hipped, although he could run, but he was tight-hipped. Collins is not tight-hipped.
But that was also a different era with Levon Kirkland. Levon Kirkland wouldn't play on passing downs now.
No, he certainly would not.
I played against him a couple times. That was not fun.
Yeah.
for him to have that head of steam. Here's what I would say to Zaven Collins. There's no value in the 10 pounds between 260 and 270 for him.
No.
Like, that doesn't help him at all for the stuff he's going to be asked to do. Like you know what I think, Greg? I think he probably played at like 265, and I am now fascinated to see what he could be at 250.
Right.
You know, like, and it might be difficult for him, but if he could get to 250, like, he could really be like, you know, you think about the Van Der Esch's and the Edmonds. I mean, he could really be something. Anyway, we got to get to the DBs. Let's start with corners. They'll go higher off the board. They're more talked about. I am, by the way, Greg, always fascinated. And there's other positions like this, but boy, there are different body types for corners. Like, just think about Patrick Surtain II versus Asante Samuel Jr. I mean, really, you're talking about 4 or 5 inches difference in height.
Well, we can start with Surtain because when all's said and done, he was my favorite corner to watch. You know me, I don't necessarily love lists. I don't sit here and say number, because it's hard, let's say, to compare Patrick Surtain and Asante Samuel. But Surtain was just my favorite corner to watch. I think that playing mirror match press man, and for people that don't know what that means you're in press man coverage, but you don't physically jam with your hands the receiver off the ball. You let him declare his route, and then you literally just get in his hip pocket. You're mirroring his route. So we call that mirror match press man. Patrick Surtain, to me, was just born to play that. It looks effortless when he plays mirror match press man. And he reminded me the way in which he played that coverage of Champ Bailey. It just looks effortless. And again, we know who his dad was, who played in the league for a long time at corner, but it just looks like Surtain was born to play that coverage. But having said that, he can play physical press. He's very physical and competitive as a tackler on the outside. To me, he was the most complete corner prospect in this draft class.
So I've read on multiple occasions that there's a concern of how high his ceiling is. There's a thought that maybe Jaycee Horn has more upside. What do you think people are seeing or getting at when they're saying those things, Greg?
There may be a sense that, and we've heard this through the years, we know that Nick Saban, that his background is coaching the secondary. So there's a sense when Alabama corners come out that they've been coached so extremely well that they're playing to their highest level right now, that they're not going to be better. That's a very difficult question for me to answer. The only thing I would say about Surtain, that I don't want to say it's concerning because it didn't happen often, but he's not necessarily a burner. He's not. Tennessee wide receiver Josh Palmer ran by him a few times. He's not that guy. Whatever it means, he's a 4.46 guy on his 40-yard dash, so he's not a speed guy. But I can't answer that. To me, he's just a really good corner.
What did you see from Jaycee Horn from South Carolina?
I mean, I think Jaycee Horn is a really good prospect too. I think he checks all the boxes. There's no question about that. I mean, you're talking about a kid that's 6'1", 205. His measurables are really strong. He's got size, length. What stood out was his physicality and his competitiveness. That really stood out. The one thing he will have to clean up, which you're allowed to do in college, but not in the NFL, Ross, is he was very handsy and grabby through receivers' routes. And you can do that in college. You can't do that in the NFL. But he's got all the athletic and physical traits you want in an outside corner. He can play press. He can play physical press. He can play mirror match press. I mean, you watch him against Auburn when he lined up against their wide receiver, Seth Williams, who likely will be drafted. I mean, that was textbook mirror match press man, just getting in the hip pocket of Williams and maintaining contact throughout the route. It was beautiful. So he checks all the boxes. He just has to clean up the handsy, grabby approach.
All right, so we're well aware at this point of Caleb Farley's back surgeries and the medical issues. What about just what you saw on the tape, Greg?
And you have to remember with Farley that he was a quarterback in high school. He does not have a ton of experience, Ross, playing corner. So he's still learning. But this kid, he is so powerfully built. Size-wise, he's similar to Horn and Surtain, but he just looks different the way he's built. He's got explosive movement traits. He's kind of a fun guy to watch just because of the way he's built and the way he moves. To me, watching tape, that's all I'm going on. To me, because he does not have a ton of experience at the position, he was much better playing press man than he was playing off-coverage zone. Because as you know, Ross, zone requires a lot more understanding of things. It requires you to understand receiver distribution, receiver splits, route combinations, how they go together. When do you carry? When do you pass to a teammate? Those are things that are learned, and he doesn't have that kind of experience. He hasn't played a lot of football at the corner position, but the physical and athletic traits are there, and he is a powerful, explosive moving athlete.
What did you think? Did you get a chance to watch Greg Newsome from Northwestern?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I've seen a ton of corners, because normally corners and wide receiver are positions that are drafted an awful lot each year. So Newsome's another guy that he was also handsy and grabby. That's something he's going to have to clean up as well. Now, he's played a ton of man, a ton of zone. He's a little high cut and long-legged, but he's very smooth. He's got natural quickness. I wouldn't say he's sudden and twitchy, which, we like to see in outside corners, but there are times he kind of looked that way. But I would say ultimately you're just looking at a really smooth athlete, very poised, very composed. The term we like to use with corners that play man and certainly mirror match press man is they stay in phase through the route stem. So that means they just stay with their technique. They stay right in the hip pocket of the receiver. There's nothing hurried or frenetic about their movement. They just stay right in their comfortable phase. And that's a really strong trait for him.
So if you could only talk about one more corner, Greg, there's the two kids from Georgia. There's Joseph from Kentucky. There's Molden. There's Samuel. If you only talk about one more corner, who would it be?
Well, you mentioned Samuel, so let's talk about him. To me, he's a very fascinating litmus test because he played outside at Florida State. He's got terrific traits to play corner, and is super competitive. He's 5'10" and 1/8, 180. So the question becomes, is he an outside corner in the NFL in this era where many wide receivers are getting bigger and bigger? So he could be giving up 3-4 inches and 30 to 40 pounds playing on the outside in the NFL. So the question is, what is he? It would not surprise me if he moves inside to the slot. But on the other hand, some teams could see him in the mold of a Steven Nelson. Steven Nelson has played on the outside for a number of teams. I forget who he just signed with. He was with Pittsburgh, but I remember watching him when he came out of Oregon State, and he was really competitive in the same way Asante Samuel is. So Samuel is going to be a fascinating litmus test because he has really good sticky man coverage traits. But at 5'10", 180, is he an outside corner? It's an unanswerable because it will be in the eye of the beholder.
So let's get to safety, Greg. I don't spend as much time on it because there might not be any taken in the first round. Feels like this is the same way every year, where there's like not a first round guy. There's a few that could go late first, early second. Is there a guy you love? Because I like letting you talk about guys you love.
Well, there's a couple of guys I really like. And one guy I really liked on tape was Cisco from Syracuse, who got hurt, and I think he only played 2 games this year. But I think this kid, to me, he can play multiple positions within different defensive concepts and schemes. I think he's as good a post-safety prospect as there is in this draft class. There's not a lot of post-safety prospects. And I think he's as good as there is. I mean, he's got play speed and range. He's got great ball skills and production. I mean, this kid played 24 games in college, Ross, and had 13 interceptions. Think about that for a minute. I think he had range to work from the middle of the field to the sideline. He could work from one hash outside the opposite hash when he was cheated. I mean, he was also used as a man-to-man defender on wide receivers and tight ends. I really like Andre Cisco. I'm fascinated to see, number one, where he's drafted, because he only played 2 games this year, and who drafts him and how they see him when they draft him.
So, Greg, you and I know what a post safety is, and I think we've talked about it on the show before, but a lot of our listeners, they love listening to you because they learn. Post safety, Greg, your explanation.
Oh, post safety is when you're in a coverage that has just a deep safety, a single high deep safety. So it's cover 1, which is man to man with a single high deep safety, or cover 3, which is zone coverage with a single high deep safety. There's only one deep safety. That's what a post safety is, and that's what I was speaking about with Andre Cisco.
So, I mean, that happens a lot. I mean, there's a lot of single high looks in the NFL. If he's the best post safety, I would think there's a lot of people looking for guys for that role. I feel like
there's other guys
safeties are the guys that the 2 deep safeties are the guys that are good near the line. I feel like those are easier to find than a really good post safety with range.
You're 100% right, and that's why over the last 4 or 5 years, Ross, there's been a gradual increase in split safety, meaning 2 safeties now in split safety coverage in the NFL. If you look at the statistics, a coverage called quarters, cover 4, has been on the increase incrementally each year, because it's very hard to find true post safeties. And in the NFL, that's a big factor, obviously. So there's been, as I said, a gradual increase in split safety coverage concepts, particularly cover 4.
So if you're not already, make sure you subscribe to this show so you can make sure you hear Greg next Friday morning after round 1 of the NFL draft. And of course, you can read all of Greg's draft profiles at fantasypoints.com. Just make sure you use the code 21Feast. But there's a lot of other players that Greg and I don't get a chance to talk about that Greg has evaluated and written up profiles on. So it's a great way to go. Fantasypoints.com. Use the code 21Feast. Greg, you're the man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ross. Appreciate it.
Gosh, I love Greg. You know what else I love? My mom. Mother's Day season is here, and that means it's 1-800-Flowers.com time. Ordering early means getting the best selection of bouquets that are guaranteed to show her she's loved. Right now at 1-800-Flowers, you can get 36 sorbet roses. That sounds good. For $36. These aren't your average roses either. I love these sorbet roses. You guys know me by now. I get it from my mom. I get it from my mother-in-law. I get it from my wife. No matter what they say, they love flowers. They love roses. I actually think they like the multicolored more than the red, but I think maybe for Valentine's Day, it's more of a red for your significant other. Anyway, to order 36 sorbet roses for $36, like I do every Valentine's Day, every Mother's Day, go to 1-800-Flowers.com, click the radio icon, and enter code football. That's 1-800-Flowers.com. Code football. Hurry, this offer expires Friday. That's tomorrow.
Tuck's Takes.
Morning, Ross. Let's start with some of the actual rule changes in the NFL. They announced yesterday. What are they, and your thoughts?
No overtime in the preseason. That's awesome if you are a preseason broadcaster like I am. We don't need overtime in the preseason. I'm surprised it took them this long to get rid of that. One less guy in what they call, I don't know, the recovery zone or something. One less guy trying to recover an onside kick for the kickoff return team. They're not doing the 4th and 15 thing, which I think would be amazing. They're keeping the onside kick. So they're trying to make it a little bit easier to try to recover an onside kick. The replay official is going to be more involved, but still vague as to what exactly that means. And they're going to allow single digits for skill guys, which is pretty awesome. And we'll see some number changes. However, you got to buy out the entire inventory of your old jersey if you want to switch. However, I would think by the time you buy out the whole inventory and then switch, everybody's going to want to get your new one. I don't know. Somebody have to do the math on that one for me.
Tuck's Takes.
The NFL announced yesterday that they're going to announce the 2021 NFL regular season schedule on May 12th.
I might be the only person or one of the only people, Bri, in the galaxy that is like more interested in the preseason schedule because I want to see what Eagles games I'm calling when. I guess they're all coming out May 12th. Used to come out before the draft. Used to be a big deal. I think they've realized, though, there's enough like pre-draft buzz that doing it in mid-May, it gives it another like turbo boost at that point on the calendar.
Tuck's Takes.
Any thoughts on Devontae Smith weighing 166 pounds, Zaven Collins weighing 270, or it being revealed that Justin Fields has had epileptic seizures in the past?
Well, I think Greg and I hit the Devontae Smith and Zaven Collins thing pretty much. I'm not overly concerned about either, but I do think it's fair to discuss it, and in particular to reach out to Zaven Collins or Tulsa and find out what he played at last year. As for Justin Fields, it obviously appears to be something that he's been able to manage and manage well. I actually like hearing these stories in the sense that it can really be inspirational to other people that have to deal with similar issues. So kudos to Justin Fields for revealing that. And I didn't realize this, but Hall of Famer Alan Faneca evidently, had seizures and had to take medication to manage that. And he obviously had a ridiculous career.
Tuck's Takes.
Other news includes, and it says here, read all at once, Brian. So we will go and start with safety. TJ Ward retires. Wide receiver Antonio Brown settles lawsuit. Running back Bryce Love cut and unclaimed on waivers. Seahawks signed cornerback Pierre Desir, and the Niners sign Arden Key and Wayne Gallman.
TJ Ward had a nice career. It's interesting. It feels like TJ Ward was around forever. He played 8 years. And I guess it's natural. I always kind of relate to me playing 7. And he started a lot more games, made a lot more money, whatever. But makes me feel good that it feels like TJ Ward was around forever, and I was almost around that long. Antonio Brown settling that lawsuit probably gives him a better chance to get signed by somebody now that at least that legal issue is not hanging over him anymore. The Bryce Love story, wow, did you hear that, Bry? That was not intentional. Did you get that?
Got it, yeah.
Like the Bryce Love story. No, the Bryce Love, story. It's not a love story. I think he's probably done. He was never able to recover from the torn ACL that he suffered at Stanford. It's funny because, not funny, but the running back before him, Christian McCaffrey, was the first one to skip a bowl game, caught some flack for that. Bryce Love, objectively, from a business and financial decision, should have turned professional after the ridiculous 2,000-yard year or whatever he had. It's very rare that it makes sense to come back to school. I don't think it helped Travis Etienne at Clemson at all. I wish more guys, especially at running backs, would leave school early. Although I guess you could argue Najee Harris improved his draft stock. As for Desir, Arden Key, Wayne Gallman, these are teams that would like to go into the draft without feeling like they have to draft a player at a certain position. So Desir is a competent corner. Key gives the Niners some depth as an edge rusher. Gallman gives them another runner that had a pretty good year, actually, for the Giants, filling in for Saquon Barkley. So all those things make sense, just like it makes sense for you to take the code Ross over to the DraftKings Sportsbook. I mean, the offer they have right now for UFC, are you kidding me? I mean, Masvidal, Usman, 26-1 odds. Just put a bet on either guy, 26-1 odds. So if you bet $5 on either fighter to win, you get $130. Just make sure you use the code Ross over at DraftKings Sportsbook. I love that because you might not be that into MMA, but it makes it a heck of a lot more interesting if you can win $130 after you put $5 down if your guy wins. Other than that, Bri, shout outs are in order. But of course, for all of our Patreon members, but especially Pizza Boy Brewing, delicious, Sporticulture, delicious, Vision Comics with an X, HumanHeadNYC.com. That'll do it for us for this week. However, you can listen to Fantasy Feast. Grant Barfield was amazing. Even Money. College Draft with Emery Hunt's Elite. Business of Sports. Andrew Brandt went over the Super League with Taylor Twellman. Check that out. And your boy, me. I'll be on the Dan Patrick Show tomorrow, 9 a.m. to noon Eastern, guest hosting, if you want to see your buddy on a Meat Friday. I think we're done here. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also subscribe to the Fantasy Feast, Even Money, Business of Sports, and College Draft. All available at Apple Podcasts, RossTucker.com, or wherever podcasts can be found.
A lot of times on the show, I mentioned DraftKings. Here's what you need to know. You got to be 21 or older, New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER, or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. By the way, if what I was talking about included a deposit bonus, doesn't always, sometimes it does. Deposit bonus requires 25 times playthrough, and deposit bonuses are paid out in site credit.